How did Zimbabwe, once the breadbasket of Africa, turn into a nation struggling to feed its own people? In the early days following its independence in 1980, Zimbabwe was a beacon of hope and prosperity. The nation was rich in resources, and its fertile lands were yielding abundant harvests. Zimbabwe was not merely self-sufficient, it was the breadbasket of Africa, exporting food to its neighbors and beyond. The economy flourished, bolstered by a robust agricultural sector, and a sense of collective optimism permeated the society. People from all walks of life, rural farmers, city dwellers, entrepreneurs and educators, were hopeful for a future that seemed bright and promising. The newly minted nation stood tall, its promise echoing across the continent. Zimbabwe was a testament to what a nation could achieve when it was driven by determination, unity, and resourcefulness. From a promising start, what led Zimbabwe to its current state of economic despair? The year 2000 marked a turning point for Zimbabwe with the introduction of the Fast-Track Land Reform Program. This program, born from an urgent desire to rectify the country's colonial-era land imbalances, sought to redistribute land from the white minority to the black majority. It was a bold, even radical attempt to right historical wrongs and reshape the socio-economic landscape of Zimbabwe. The intentions of the land reform program were anchored in a vision of justice and empowerment. The hope was to foster a more equitable distribution of land and resources, to uplift the rural poor and to stimulate agricultural growth. However, as noble as these intentions were, the implementation of the program was mired in haste and disorganization. Without a clear strategy or adequate resources for training and support, the program was set up for failure. Land was seized and redistributed, but the new owners, many of them with little to no farming experience, struggled to maintain the productivity levels of their predecessors. The result was a dramatic drop in agricultural output, plunging the country into food shortages. Zimbabwe, once known as the breadbasket of Africa, was now unable to feed its own people. This decline in agricultural productivity had a domino effect on the country's economy. As the agricultural sector faltered, so did the industries that relied on it. Unemployment soared, inflation skyrocketed, and the country spiraled into economic instability. The Fast-Track Land Reform Program, while launched with high hopes, ended up creating more problems than it solved. It was a case of good intentions gone awry, a lesson in the importance of careful planning and execution. The program's failure wasn't just a setback, it was a catastrophe that shook the nation to its core. The land reform program, intended to redress colonial-era land imbalances, proved disastrous for Zimbabwe. It was a turning point indeed, but not the kind the nation had hoped for. Rather than paving the way towards economic prosperity and social justice, it set the stage for a long and painful period of decline. Following the land reforms, Zimbabwe plunged into economic chaos. Imagine a situation where prices double every day, where a loaf of bread costs millions, then billions, then trillions of dollars. That was the reality of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation crisis. The Zimbabwean dollar, once a symbol of the country's independence and prosperity, became virtually worthless. Hyperinflation in Zimbabwe began in the late 90s, but it reached unprecedented levels in the mid-2000s. The year 2008 witnessed the second highest inflation rate in history, with prices doubling every 24.7 hours. The government was forced to print $100 trillion notes, an unthinkable denomination. Yet these were still not enough to buy a bus ticket. This economic meltdown had devastating consequences. Zimbabwe, once known as the breadbasket of Africa, was now unable to feed its own people. The country's agricultural sector, which had once been the backbone of the economy, was in ruins. As the economy spiraled downwards, so did employment opportunities. Unemployment rates skyrocketed, with estimates suggesting that up to 90% of the population was out of work at the height of the crisis. Those who were lucky enough to have a job often found their wages worthless due to the rampant inflation. Living conditions deteriorated rapidly. Basic commodities became luxuries, and the standard of life for Zimbabweans plummeted. Hospitals lacked essential medicines, schools were under-resourced, and the infrastructure started to crumble. The impact of the economic collapse was felt in every corner of society. The economic collapse also led to a mass exodus of Zimbabweans. Millions fled the country, seeking better opportunities elsewhere. Those who stayed behind were left to grapple with the harsh realities of life in a broken economy. In essence, the economic collapse was not just about money, it was about the loss of dignity, the erosion of hope, and the shattering of a dream for a better life. Zimbabwe, a country that once held such promise, was brought to its knees by a crisis of its own making. The once prosperous nation was now in the throes of an economic nightmare. Adding to Zimbabwe's woes were political unrest and rampant human rights violations. The political landscape of Zimbabwe was akin to a rickety ship caught in a storm. Corruption became a shadow, looming large over the government. The integrity of the nation's leadership was compromised as pockets were lined with ill-gotten gains while the population suffered. This was not a government by the people, for the people, but rather a government exploiting the people. Elections, meant to be a beacon of democratic progression, were tainted by violence and intimidation. Instead of being a platform for expressing the will of the people, they became a tool for maintaining the status quo. The ruling party clung to power, using fear as a weapon to suppress any opposition. Zimbabwe today stands as a stark reminder of a nation's potential downfall. Once brimming with promise, the country now grapples with economic struggles, political instability, and ongoing human rights issues. The once prosperous economy now languishes, with hyperinflation and unemployment casting a long shadow over the nation's potential. The political scene remains volatile, with dissent often met with suppression, compromising the democratic fabric of the nation. Yet amid the turmoil, glimmers of hope emerge. The resilience of the Zimbabwean people, their enduring spirit and unyielding desire for a better future, fuel the possibility of recovery. Potential paths to reclaim lost glory are being explored, and with the right combination of robust policies, international support, and a commitment to uphold human rights, Zimbabwe could yet turn a corner. While Zimbabwe's past is marked by downfall, its future holds the potential for redemption. The phoenix of Zimbabwe may yet rise from the ashes of its troubled past.